the final three Makkos, and we have Paray after Makkos Becharis, the plague of the firstborn. So Paray is Ganukshain. It's enough already of this, and he finally gives us permission to go. And so we have permission the night of Pesach night. We have permission to leave, and then the next morning we eventually do leave. So in the context of that whole Maisa, the Torah tells us that because the Makkos Becharis took place in a way that the Rabban Shalom was medalig, was peseach, jumped over or hopped over the houses of the Jewish people, Benagfa Es Mitzrayim, as he's giving the Makkah to the Egyptians. So because of that, we have the Karban Pesach. And by the time of the Beis HaMikdash, the Karban Pesach was really the centerpiece of the Seder night. I mean, that was really the main avodah was the Karban Pesach. So the pasuk tells us regarding how to eat the Karban Pesach. It says Al matzes umroirim yochlu, that you should eat the Karban Pesach night, Seder night, with matzah and mar. So matzah and mar we have nowadays. Pesach we don't, unfortunately. But the way it was done with the Karban Pesach is Al matzes umroirim yochlu. What does it mean to eat Pesach with the matzah and mar? So it's famous. It's the sheet of Hillel. Hillel in the Gemara tells us that what the pasuk means to tell us is that you should make a sandwich. You should be kairech pesach matzah. We should bring it together, the Karban Pesach, the matzah mar, which by the way tells you that the matzah that Hill ate was more of the Sephardic matzah, more the lafa type, where you could actually make a sandwich of it. Us Ashkenazim, even without the Pesach, we just have the lettuce. You know what I'm saying? You struggle, you know what I mean, to do that, because you take one bite, the whole thing falls apart, and it's a big problem. So you see that the Sephardim know what they're doing. Al Kapanim, that's what Hill said, is that you have to make the matzah, you have to eat all the things together. Pesach, matzah, mar, all together. All right, that's what Hill used to say. That's the sheet of Hill. All right, so questions like this. Davud Raham, one of the Rishonim, other Rishonim as well, asked the question. In the Haggadah, when we talk about why we eat matzah, so the answer is, because that's the bread that we ate as we were leaving Mitzrayim, right? As the pasuk says, we didn't have time to allow the bread to rise, to the dough to rise, and that's what. So we came out with matzah. So matzah is a symbol of redemption. Why do we eat the Karban Pesach? Well, the Karban Pesach also because Hashem jumped over the houses, and that's why we have the Karban Pesach. So again, the Karban Pesach is therefore a symbol of redemption. Why do we eat mar? Well, it says the Haggadah, we eat mar because they embittered the lives of the Jewish people during the slavery. So mar is a sign of slavery. So ask the Vudraham a very simple question. I understand why you should eat mar Pesach night, because to appreciate the freedom, you have to remember the slavery. But to say that you should eat Pesach, matzah, and mar all together in one sandwich doesn't make much sense, because that's 2 out of the 3 ingredients of that sandwich are more about redemption, and one of them is about slavery. The maror should be eaten before, and you should eat it first, or separate, to remind you of the slavery, and then you could appreciate the sandwich of matzah and Pesach, which is about freedom. But what is this Indian? What is this idea that Pesach, matzah, and maror are all eaten together? Again, I understand why you should eat mar Pesach night, but to put that together with matzah and Pesach doesn't seem to make much sense. Pesach and matzah is about freedom, and the mar is about the slavery. That's the question of Vudraham. Other Rishonim asked this question as well. Okay, now, another thing to think about, when you sort of take a step back and look at the general parshas that we're in, Bo, B'Shalach, so it becomes very clear that the process of Yetzias Mitzrayim took place in actually 3 steps. 3 steps. The first step was Pesach night. Makkos Becharis comes, right? The 10 plagues are done. Paro gives us permission to leave, and we have permission that night. That's the Seder night. The next morning we actually left Mitzrayim. That's stage number 1. Okay. Stage number 2 of the redemption was a few days later, right? 7 days later. We're now by Yam Suf, and the Egyptians run after us again, and the splitting of the sea. That's another redemption, and that's why we have the 2nd day's Yontif of Pesach to celebrate that. And so, okay, that's Yetzias Mitzrayim, right? What's left? The truth is, it's not over, because again, in Parshas B'Shalach, where it talks about Kriyas Yam Suf, the whole story over there, the song and everything. So afterwards, the pasuk says that the Jewish people traveled from Yam Suf, and they got to a place of Mara, right? That was the name of the place. Why was it called Mara? The word Mara means bitter, and the reason is because they got to this place and they couldn't find any water. All the water they had was bitter water. It wasn't drinkable. It wasn't. You couldn't survive on it. So the pasuk says like this: V'yitzak al Hashem, the Jewish people, Moshe Rabbeinu, on behalf of the Jewish people, davened to Hashem. V'yireu Hashem eitz, and Hashem showed Moshe Rabbeinu miraculously a type of tree appeared to Moshe. V'yashech al hamayim, he took this tree, the bark of the tree, threw it into the water. V'yimtuku hamayim, and the water became sweetened. It became palatable. Now that's the story, and that's why it's called Mara. Now, just a little bit on the side, Chazal tell us that this was not just a miracle that you take a piece of wood and throw it into water, and now the water is good. It's more than that. It was a miracle within a miracle, says the Gemara, because the bark of this particular type of wood was itself bitter. So the water is bitter. You take a bitter tree, you put it in the bitter water, it becomes sweet. So it's a miracle within a miracle. Now Hashem says, Vayomer, and Hashem says after this miracle, Im Shemaya Tishmel Kol Hashem L'Kecha, that if the Jewish people, if you listen to the voice of your God, Vayosha Bein Tasa, and you do what's right in His eyes, Vazantel Mitzvoisav, and you listen to His mitzvahs, V'Shamarta Kol Chuchav, and you keep all His laws, Kol Hamachla Asher Samtim B'Mitzrayim Lo Yasim Alecha, all the sicknesses and disease and punishment and suffering that you saw in Egypt won't go to you, Keni Hashem Ravecha, because I am Hashem, the one that cures you. In other words, what's Hashem talking about Mitzrayim right now? We're already past that. Clearly, what's being told to us, and the Parshas explain, is that this last experience in the place of Mara, finding bitter waters, and the waters turning from bitter into sweet, through throwing a bitter plant into it, this was the Makabeh Patish. This was the final seal in that coffin called Yetzias Mitzrayim. This was the final part of the redemption. And that's why after this whole thing, then Hashem says, okay, finally, now Mitzrayim is in the rearview mirror. Now you're already done. Now you're already done. And if you keep Torah and mitzvahs, you'll never have to deal with anything like that ever again. So this is, and by the way, it's interesting. In next week, you will see this, B'ez Hashem, when you learn Parshas B'Shalach. So the truth is, the division of the aliyahs are not necessarily, they don't go back to Chazal. Like Chazal weren't the ones to decide where's Rishon, where's Sheni, where's Shlish. They were the ones that decide that you have to have 7 aliyahs. But in terms of where you divide up in the parsha, it's not from Chazal. It's later on, it just sort of organically developed. But it's with Hashgacha Pratis, obviously, it's with divine providence. The Hashgacha Pratis is it that the aliyah of Kriyas Yamsuf, of the splitting of the sea, includes within it this story of the waters turning from bitter into sweet. Why? Because again, it's part of the redemptive story. This is the last part of the redemption. So, in other words, Yetzias Mitzrayim is in 3 parts. There's Pesach night, the end of the 10 plagues, the Seder night, when Paro gives permission to leave. You have 7 days later by Kriyas Yamsuf itself. And then you have a few days later with this story of Mara. All right, so what does this tell us? We know that Yetzias Mitzrayim was not just something that our people went through, it's something that we have to go through. Every time a person has any growth in their Yiddishkeit, in their Avodah, it's on some level a Yetzias Mitzrayim. The word Mitzrayim, for example, is Egypt, but the word Mitzrayim also comes from the word Meitzer, which means constriction, something that's holding a person back. So anytime there's an exit, anytime there's an exodus from any situation that is constricting a person, that's called Yetzias Mitzrayim. And what the Torah is telling us is that all spiritual growth is in 3 stages. What does that mean? All right, so what's the first stage? The first stage is like this. The first stage can be described in Chassidus, the way it's described is with the following terminology, which is called an Or Pnimi, an inner light. What does that mean? It means the beginning of one's redemption, the beginning of one's leaving Mitzrayim, is when a person sort of comes in contact and begins to sort of meets the Rebbeinu Shalom for the first time. Sometimes, you meet God, and the God that you meet initially is a God that sort of fits within your world, within your space. It's an inner light. It's a light that fits within you. There's nothing too drastic, nothing too crazy. The person, something dawns upon the person that they have to begin to work on themselves. Let's say they have to learn a little bit more, be a little more careful with davening. Nothing too crazy though. And the type of recognition, this level of the sort of the light bulb moment, and the level of commitment that they're taking upon themselves, the level of redemption that they're experiencing, is one that fits within their world. It fits within their, what their comfort zone relatively, but it's just pushing them a little bit forward. This was what was going on the night of Pesach. We were still in Egypt. We're still in Egypt. So it's not like a huge overhaul in terms of like who we are and what we're doing. We're finding Hashem, we're finding ourselves, we're moving to the next level, but that discovery, this level of discovery that we find Hashem, so to speak, is what we're finding is a God that fits within us, within our framework, within our ability to process. It's still relatively comfortable and calm. This is represented by the matzah. See, the matzah is described as lechem oini, poor man's bread. But Chazal said that the word oini doesn't just mean poor, it means lechem sha'oinim olav dvarim harbe. It's bread that you speak a lot of things about. mean, the whole Seder night, we're talking, you talk about the whole story, talk, questions, answers, and the matzah is uncovered during that entire process. The matzah, therefore, represents a redemption which is connected to speech. What does it mean to speak? It means I have an idea that I fully understand and I'm comfortable with, and it's within my zone. I fully process it, and I'm trying to communicate it to you. So the level of redemption of stage one is redemption of speech, which is that it's a level of the Rabbanu Shalom, it's a level of religiosity that it's within my zone, it's within my comfort zone, and I can talk about it, I can articulate it, it's something that makes sense to me, and I could communicate it to others. That's stage one. But then you move on, and the Jew has to move on. And then you move on to another level, which is called, what's described in this term as an armakif, a surrounding light. What does a surrounding light mean? It means that it's not enough to meet a God that fits within your world. It's not enough to meet a Rabbanu Shalom that you can process, that you can figure out. The next stage in Yitzis and Sarayim is for a Jew to come in contact with that part of God which is greater than them, which is bigger than them. And that's a moment where a person, let's say, sometimes it comes with a tremendous inspiration. Sometimes it comes with maybe being in the presence of a person that's greater, a tzaddik. Maybe it means like being in Eretz Yisrael or being in an environment which is like big, an armakif. So this is the next stage. This is called Kriyas Yamsuf. Kriyas Yamsuf was the Jewish people meeting sort of the next part of their growth, which is getting beyond their little bubble, getting beyond their comfort zone, and coming in contact with a Yiddishkeit, with a level of Avodas Hashem, which is just beyond their reach, and in a good way. In a good way. It's something that's like, touching and not touching, like a bird hovering over a nest, touching and not touching. Something that's a little bit beyond their comfort zone, but still something that they're experiencing. Those are usually very exciting moments. This is why the Jewish people celebrate that experience with a song. See, what's a song? A song is it's not words. See, when a person has an idea that they fully understand, that's something you communicate with simple words. But if you have an experience that you can't really, I don't even know what that was, I can't even make sense of it myself, it's a niggin. That's what a niggin is. Kriyas Yamsuf Az Yasher, the song of the Red Sea, that was a song that the Jewish people expressed. What they were expressing is that they just met God for the first time, and they realized, wow, God it's much bigger than I thought. In a good way. That's an exciting thing. That's an exciting time. That's with his Hisayrus, with his Lavos. This is represented by the Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach is what? Is a mashal, it's a representation of the fact that Hashem jumped over the houses of the Jewish people. Meaning that it's sort of like you see Hashem just above your roof. It's not within your house. Within your house, it's your comfort zone. But now Hashem is jumping over your roof. He's not like all the way in the heavens, so I'm feeling His presence, but what I'm feeling is a presence that's bigger than me. And that jolts me out of my sort of slumber. It jolts me out of my comfort zone. And it's exciting. It's amazing. It's amazing. This is the next stage of growth, where it first starts off as very, very comfortable. I'm like, okay, I can handle this. This is me. And sort of nothing new, nothing too crazy. But then the next stage is Kriyas Yamsuf, where it's like a niggin. The words are no longer able to be communicated in a normal, mesudadig way. It now has to be sung, because it's something, it's electrifying. But then there's the third stage. What's the third stage? The third stage is finally where this big God that we're just amazed by, and the Yiddishkeit that is just hovering over your head, The final stage is where you're fully redeemed, where you fully came out of that small package that you were originally tied up in, What does that feel like? What's interesting is what that feels like when you actually hit your ceiling, what I'm saying? When you actually reach the destination, it feels like absolutely nothing. It feels like nothing. Now this is the amazing, this is such a fascinating klal in Avodas Hashem. The Marva Shemesh, the great student of the Naomi Lamelech, he talks about this in a number of places in his farm. He says that very often a person finds where, let's say, they're davening and they're learning and they're doing all things, and and they're going through these stages. First it makes sense. It's just a routine. This is what I do, and then there's that inspiration, the flashbulb moment. God's hovering over the roof, and it's amazing. It's exciting. It's with song, and it's unbelievable. It's on fire, and then just falls off. All the inspiration goes away, and it's like the person feels absolutely nothing. So usually what we attribute that process is that now you're in a read, you're a reader. Now you fell down. Now you fell down. You have to now be mechazi yourself to pick yourself back up. And now there's like a yerida. Said the Rav Shemesh, no, it's not true. More often than not, what is actually.